I keep talking? Testing, testing. 3, 4. This is it. The emergency broadcast. Testing.
Are they on their way though? Since we start in 6 minutes. By 6:45. Yep.
Making sure your dad's speech is up there. Wait. Thank you. Not that I don't trust you, I just don't screw in.
The House will convene in 1 minute. Please be seated.
The House will come back to order. Members, without objection, we will go to order business number 9, motions. Majority Leader Eli.
Mr. Speaker, I move the House recess for the purpose of receiving the State of the State address from the Honorable Steve Bullock, Governor of the State of Montana. Upon adjournment of the joint session, the House will be adjourned until the hour of 1 p.m. Wednesday, January 25th. Mr. Speaker.
You've heard the motion of Majority Leader Eli. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and so ordered. Sergeant-at-Arms Murfitt.
Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Senators of the State of Montana await entrance into the chamber.
The Sergeant-at-Arms will please admit the Senate into the House chambers. Members of the body, I introduce to you Senate President Sayles.
Majority Leader Thomas.
Mr. President, I move that the body resolve itself into a joint session for the purpose of receiving the address from the Honorable Steve Bullock, Governor of the State of Montana.
You've heard the motion of Senator Thomas. All those in favor will say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Senator Thomas.
Mr. President, I move that the President be authorized to appoint a committee of 4 to notify Governor Bullock that we are in joint session and ready to receive his State of the State address.
You've heard the motion of Majority Leader Thomas. Without objection, the President appoints Senator Sands, Senator Webb, Representative McCamey, and Representative Weber. The committee will now be discharged to escort the Governor, Steve Bullock, into the floor chambers. Yeah. Members and guests, please rise for the invocation by Father Mark Lenneman and the tribal prayer by Representative Stuart Paraguay, and remain standing for the posting of the colors by the Montana National Guard, Color Guard, and the singing of our national anthem by Senior Airman Kristen Wiley.
We begin in prayer. Good and gracious God, we give thanks to you this night for your manifold graces. We thank you in particular for the blessing of living in this great state, renowned for the beauty and goodness found in both its land and in its people. From Conrad to Colstrip, Melrose to Missoula, Hysham to Helena, Roundup to Ronan, Billings to Browning, and all the other communities that make up our home, you have richly blessed this state. We thank you for the men and women who work and sacrifice with such love to make Montana such a special part of these United States of America. Tonight we pause from the duties and details of the day to give you thanks and to ask your blessing upon all Montanans, and especially upon the elected officials who represent them. Send forth in abundance your gracious spirit of wisdom and right judgment, understanding and insight. Grant these civil servants a particular grace to be models of civility, graciousness, cooperation, and creative servant leadership, so that Montana may shine as a beacon to our nation in these often tense and difficult days. May the differences in this room and in our state not result in division, but may they rather become a source of enrichment and creativity as we seek to find just solutions to the challenges of the day. Scripture tells us, from the fullness of the heart, the mouth speaks. May the words spoken here in this Capitol tonight and in the weeks and months ahead come from hearts full of a deep desire to serve all Montanans, hearts ready to truly listen to differing perspectives, and hearts courageous enough to cooperate so that our beautiful state may become an even better place to live, work, and raise future generations. Bless and continue to bless, Lord, this state, its people, and our gathering here tonight. We pray this in your most holy name. Amen.
Representative Paraguay.
Aho. Ina apa hesh biko kodai iwat khawak. Hilagesh. Bawikich kuiu kachi. Dios asau gina pesh. Biko kodai hidash akilelesh bale yesuri kyu. Bale shigosh yesuri kyu. Hilagesh is just sit beshesh. Agi wich bagish kodai hidash. Yesuri kyu. Akbi miu hilagesh. Bala leda kakyakoduta bawa cheje hook. Balewa shichida hidesh baledita rikyu. Hilen hawarum bidach bagesh balash teoluk baleduk a partiagari nasosh dushita rikyu hilagesh inapesh. Bawa cheje a hook. El hilagesh a mishkus saus. Itche akuluk baleduk hilagesh inapaha. El hilagesh a mawigichgosh a mawishitush bihukodahide. Balela says, "What got back? Akbi miuluk. Amalewa chile shali cheawakos. Amalele ne anele desh kodeluk the kowagali kinapish. Hina bale bila lish bakali garish is ako mechi awagat garish. However, metuvi gatus kunak akbimiuga paratiaganin. Akbaji mesha gisatesha jesh ama hilagesha hawarum kun bailisa hamala hoda gikorug. Daso stushitavlikyo anashidesh diren yesevikyo paratiaganin. El hilagesh hina amishkusau shina bala ma chargim hilelak. Birachbagesh bailish is sulapalejika paratiaganin. Dilen yesevikyo bachi davikyo. El kinapesh hilagesh balebi lalem dechevio. El itchevi hukodaide awakulag. El abiokushesh itchevi gatbao. This says a hogashi and makaho.
Skies has a
Montana PBS presents the 2017 State of the State Address from the Capitol in Helena. This program is made possible with support from the Greater Montana Foundation, encouraging communications on issues, trends, and values of importance to Montanans, and by viewers like you, who are friends of Montana PBS.
Good evening and welcome to Montana PBS's continuing political coverage. I'm John Twiggs. We'd also like to welcome listeners on Montana Public Radio joining the broadcast. Tonight, it's the governor's State of the State Address. Let's take you live to the Capitol in Helena, inside the House chamber, where there is a joint session of the Montana legislature. The 100 state representatives have invited the 50 state senators in to hear the governor speak. As you can see, they're presenting the colors right there. The governor will be invited into the chamber in just a few minutes. He's expected to speak about 45 minutes, outlining his agenda and goals for the 65th session. Our coverage tonight will include his speech in its entirety, and shortly after that we'll also have the Republican response that will be given by the Speaker of the House, Austin Knudsen, the Republican from Culbertson. Following that, we'll have in-depth interviews with lawmakers live at the Capitol. Of course, we have our analysts for this evening, Republican Bob Brown and Democrat Frankie Wilmer. Welcome back, both of you. And Bob, we'll start with you. What do you expect to hear from the governor tonight?
Well, the State of the State message is the governor's big opportunity to speak directly to the people. And that is probably particularly important if the majority in the legislature is not the governor's party. So he's going to be trying to persuade the legislators to agree with his recommendations. But he's also going to appeal to the people in the state of Montana in the hope that they'll get behind him. I think Lincoln said nothing is more powerful than the power of public opinion. So he wants to harness that and get it on his side so that the people might be able to help him get his proposals through the legislature. And he'll be as persuasive as he can with legislators as well.
Yeah. Frankie, it's his third speech. What do you expect to hear
As
from
you
him?
know,
Yeah.
I agree with Bob.
Yeah.
And I think at this particular time, everyone knows we have an ending fund balance that's lower than we would like it to be. And both sides agree, governor and legislature. So how they approach that, I think, will be very different, though. The governor will ask for fairness instead of across the board. He may still want to make some investments in some areas and cuts in others. And on the other side, I think there's an inclination rather to make large cuts that are more or less even. So those will be the two different arguments we hear. And as Bob said, the governor gets to take it to the people and hopefully, in his case, have them influence their representatives to follow his vision more than the other one.
Right, and of course we'll have the Republican response that will be coming up just after that. Also interview with lawmakers. As we get the reaction, we'll talk to some of the leadership in the legislature. It's only a few weeks into this legislative session, and we've also talked about that, about how this, at least for tonight and the beginning of this, it's a nice peace and harmony and bipartisanship. Yes, we could all use a little bit of that, even though it's going to maybe be a little bit of a slugfest later on. But you've both been there for that, and it's an exciting evening, isn't it?
Well, that's the way the system is meant to work. We're not all on the same page to begin with. We represent different interests, different visions, but we have common ground as well. So different ways of getting there, different priorities, and the two sides will argue it out for the next 80 days, I suppose, 75 days.
Right, and Bob, this is just the beginning where they're basically putting a proposal on the table, right? And then, and as Frankie was saying, then the real work gets done later.
This is the early part of any legislative session, is the easiest part, because all of us as people tend to put off the difficult decisions until later on, and with the hope that somehow or other things will work out and it might be easier to solve some of the more difficult problems if time is a factor. And sometimes that's the case. Sometimes it works that way. But legislative sessions used to, and I think still do, try very hard to get off to a good start, recognizing that the toughest days are the last days when the difficult decisions have to be made.
And they're more likely to compromise when they have to. That's just human nature.
Yeah,
Well, it's good to know procrastination reigns amongst all of us. So I believe the governor is just about to enter the chamber right now. There is a committee of legislators that are tasked with going in and talking to the governor and extending that invitation. He's now entering the chamber, as you can see right there. And this is literally, I guess, the definition of working both sides of the aisle when he comes in, isn't it? Well, the governor will make his way up to the front of the chamber as he exchanges pleasantries along the way. Once up at the front, he'll deliver a copy of the speech to leadership that will be seated behind him, as that will be Senate President Scott Sales and Speaker of the House Austin Knudsen will be there as well. So it should be an interesting speech here. As you said, we've got obviously two different visions going.
Yes, his speeches are known for length and substance. So
yes, well, he took quite a bit of
ribbing. You wouldn't want one without the other, but
yes.
He'll deliver on both, I think.
He's on his way up to the rostrum there. We're just about ready to begin. So let's listen in now for the 2017 Governor's State of the State Address.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have the distinct and high honor and privilege to present to you and the people of Montana, the governor of the great state of Montana, the Honorable Steve Bullock.
Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, members of the 65th Legislature, Lieutenant Governor Cooney, judges of our highest court, and representatives of our tribal nations, my cabinet and co-workers both in the governor's office and throughout state government, my beloved family, Lisa, Caroline, Alexandria, and Cameron, and my fellow Montanans. As we gather tonight, let us honor those serving Montana near and far. The 129 Montana National Guard, airmen, and soldiers serving our state and nation in some of the most dangerous areas around the world. The snowplow driver, keeping commerce flowing and communities connected. The Child Protective Services worker out on a call as we gather right now. They and others certainly deserve our thanks. This is the third time I've been honored to stand before this body and give my State of the State address. It's a tradition as old as the state of Montana is itself. Much has happened since I first stood before you 4 years ago, brimming with hope and optimism. I have to be honest. Over time, my heart has hardened to the blank stares, the snide remarks, the cold reception, the eyes rolling. No, I'm not talking about this side of the chamber. I'm talking about the transformation of my children into teenagers. In preparing for tonight's address, I read through speeches of governors who served before me. It struck me that no matter the moment in history, no matter the political party, we have shared values, immutable over time, a sense of pride in our state and its people, a trust in our ability to get things done, and a belief that if we band together, our state and our citizens will shine even brighter tomorrow than they do today. Let that history be our roadmap for this 65th legislative session. And let us be guided by the shared values that are as important today as when they were first spoken. Values of being responsible with Montanans' money, of making investments today so that future Montanans will have a stronger workforce, economy, and state, of recognizing that we are the treasure state, and our natural beauty, as well as our natural resources, provide opportunity. Values of supporting our businesses, of caring for those who need our help, and the bedrock value of working together to get things done. It's the constancy of these values that have helped us reach this point in our history. And holding fast to them will fuel our successes moving forward. And we have incredible success to build upon. My fellow Montanans, I stand before you pleased to report the state of our state is strong. Montana's economy is solid and growing. Today, more Montanans have jobs than ever before in our state's history. 36,000 new jobs have been created since I took office. Our unemployment rate has dropped to a near historic low of 4% and has held steady for over a year. We've grown our economy by $1.6 billion and increased personal income for hardworking Montanans by over $4 billion in the past 4 years. And household growth has been increasing in Montana faster than any state in the nation. Our economy is growing in part because it has never been as diverse as it is today. It's growing because we're investing in our students. It's growing because we're supporting our businesses and our workers. That's not to say there aren't challenges. Global commodity prices are down, a force that affects states across the West, no matter who is sitting in the governor's chair. There is uncertainty coming out of Washington, D.C., and the seeds of discontent are far too often finding their way into these very halls. If each of us here tonight recognize that we're temporary stewards of the offices we hold, if we acknowledge that the work that we do isn't about wins or losses in this building, but instead about the impact upon our neighbors, if we're willing to embrace the values that have framed this state for the past 130 years, then the challenges will be minimal compared to the opportunities within our reach. Guided by the values that have propelled us through time, we can take on the difficult decisions in our budget. We can build on a strong economy. We can take care of our neighbors and invest in our children. I am certainly not the first governor to insist on fiscal discipline from this body. Ted Schwinden said it best 34 years ago when he said, quote, "I will maintain an open mind and a sense of humor as we debate the differences. But I will not stand by and allow Montana's favorable fiscal standing to be nickeled and dimed to death. I will insist that we maintain a black ink cushion, a reasonable and necessary ending fund balance. Montana's budget must not be stained by red ink. So I'm hopeful that by our third session together, you now appreciate that my insistence on leaving a $300 million ending fund balance isn't just whimsy. It's what Montanans expect. It's why, even in the face of declining commodity prices over these past 2 years, our bond ratings remained high, and you all got to stay home between sessions. In 2013, you learned I will veto spending if you send me a budget that's in the red. In 2015, we crafted a budget together that worked for Montana and that left money for rainy days. I ask you to do that again. And just as I insist you balance our budget and leave money in the bank, I will insist that our state agencies be as careful with the money that they are given as Montana families are with their own. That's why even before the legislature came to town, we trimmed $102 million of spending. That's why even after the legislature leaves town, I will continue to challenge our agencies to be careful stewards of hardworking families' tax dollars. And it's precisely because we must be thoughtful with our tax dollars that I'm asking this legislature to bring some fairness to balancing the budget. It doesn't make sense to me that you've proposed to cut workers from our Child and Family Services Division, the people on the front lines in helping kids in harm's way, or that you propose to slash funding to community nursing homes that care for those depending on all of our help. It also doesn't make sense to me or to most Montanans that someone making $9 an hour pays the very same tax rate as someone making $250 an hour. And that's the case especially when the alternative is to cut vital services for our citizens. Increasing the top tax rate for any income over $500,000 and other modest revenue proposals before you are fair. I ask that you give them fair consideration and then pass them. I'm also not the first governor, and you're certainly not the first legislature to recognize that some of the most important investments that we can make are those that will impact Montana long after our time in office. From the earliest days of our state, when leaders were wise enough to issue bonds to construct this spectacular building we gather in tonight, to Governor Nutter, reminding us that, quote, roads are vital to our economy, to Governor Babcock proposing new buildings, quote, on our campuses, at our state institutions, and the Soldiers' Home in Columbia Falls. I have no doubt that every member of this body recognizes the importance of investing in infrastructure and publicly owned buildings. But Montanans need you to do more than recognize it. They need you to vote for it. We can celebrate the infrastructure investments we've made despite the disappointments of last session. Over the past 4 years, the Department of Transportation has let 449 projects worth nearly $1.2 billion to improve our transportation infrastructure. Montana workers have fixed over 3,000 miles of our highways. We've put people to work in 70 of our communities to deliver drinking water, clean drinking water, and upgrade sewage treatment plants. We've improved, repaired, and replaced 18 bridges. We've upgraded facilities in 37 schools. We've constructed 18 affordable housing projects and helped fund buildings on 6 of our campuses. A total of over $500 million of infrastructure investments just in the last 4 years. This is progress, but we can do more. I've proposed a $292 million investment in our bridges, local roads, sewer and water systems, and schools. This includes funding for the university system's top priority, Romney Hall. Montana State University is bursting at the seams, and we need to help it meet the needs of its growing student body. And as we reflect on history tonight, we must also commit to funding its preservation. It is irresponsible that Montana's best treasures are piled up in warehouses and in a basement across the street. We have a rich, incredible history that we need to showcase for all Montanans and for the 11 million visitors to our state each year. It's also long overdue that we build a veterans home in Butte. We must do more than say we support our veterans. We must invest in and honor their service to our nation. These projects and more are in the Build Montana proposal being heard in committee right now. Passion it will create over 1,900 jobs, pump over $83 million of wages into our economy, and better position our businesses and our communities for the future. I recognize that some of you in this body are fixated on who gets credit. I don't care who gets credit. I, like most Montanans, care about results. So please join me in undertaking the hard work of getting something to my desk that we can all agree upon. Because when we fail to invest in infrastructure, we fail Montana. As Territorial Governor Thomas Francis Meagher exhorted in 1866, quote, "The broken state of the roads, no doubt, prevented the other returns from coming up in a reasonable time." Let's not make that mistake this session. Let's instead craft a bipartisan infrastructure proposal. Let's make sure that we fund the state's share of highway projects and make those bills some of the first bills to reach my desk, not the last. Just as the investments we make in infrastructure will benefit our state for generations to come, so too will investments in our kids. Republican Territorial Governor James Tufts knew in 1868 that, quote, "Next in importance to liberty itself, the greatest blessing that we can confer upon our children is education." There's much we can be proud of when it comes to all of our work together over the past 4 years. Graduation rates have reached an all-time high at 86%. We've raised expectations for students when it comes to math, English, and science, and they are rising to the challenge. In just the last year and a half, 40% of all K-12 students have better internet access at school than they did before, further opening frontiers of knowledge and wonder. And each semester this year, the Montana University System will enroll over 2,500 high school students in college courses for dual credit, saving Montana families almost $5 million in tuition payments. We also have much to be pleased with when it comes to our wise investments in higher education. Since 2009, 46 states have decreased their funding of higher education. In Montana, we've increased funding because we know that when we invest in our students, we invest in our economy. We hear that our kids are our greatest export, yet the facts show that 80% of our resident students are now employed right here in Montana within a year of graduating, up from 74% in 2009. And now more than ever, our university system, state government, and the private sector are working together to produce graduates that have a world-class education and the knowledge and skills our local businesses need to grow and expand. Yet, there's much more to do. There are investments we can't afford not to make. I'm asking you to increase our state's investment in K-12 by $30 million. We can also increase our support for special education by $1.5 million. We can continue investments in preserving our native languages and our support for tribal colleges. We can invest $2 million to further build out the internet connectivity in our schools, and that investment will be leveraged up to 8 times over. And finally, it's time to follow the lead of 45 other states that have done it already and invest in publicly funded early childhood education. My administration and local school districts have made progress for four-year-olds in spite of and not as a result of this body. Last year, more than 650 children were able to access high-quality preschool their parents otherwise might not have been able to afford. Those children now have a brighter future because they'll enter kindergarten ready and excited to learn. The average cost of childcare in Montana for a 4-year-old is $7,900. In other words, college tuition at MSU or U of M is less. A mom earning minimum wage could easily spend half of her income on childcare just for one kiddo. Let's help those families. I've proposed a $12 million preschool grant program to allow school districts, Head Starts, or high-quality private preschool providers to offer preschool for 4-year-olds at or below 200% of the federal poverty level. Like the other 45 states that have implemented state funding for preschool, we know that this works. And if you think the research says otherwise, stop by my office. I'll give you a stack of reports taller than a 4-year-old to help in your education. If you don't think this is a good investment, consider this. The single biggest indicator of whether someone will be in prison when they're 18 years old is the size of their vocabulary when they're 5. To be clear, it costs us not to invest in kids. As Governor Babcock explained, quote, "The best way to reduce the cost of public welfare is to make it possible for every person to obtain the kind of education which will permit him to be a productive and successful member of our society." Early childhood education is that kind of education, and our kids can no longer wait. Another value that we've shared over time is supporting the growth of our businesses. As Governor Aronson said 60 years ago, quote, both political party platforms favor industry. It's our job to make Montana attractive. Well, Montana is attractive. I doubt Governor Aronson could have foreseen the explosion in our manufacturing sector or our outdoor recreation economy, or growth in our biosciences and high-tech industries. This growth is driven by the Montana work ethic, by the fact that people want to live, work, raise their families here. People love that Montana is one town with a long main street. They love that when you get off work at 5 o'clock in the summer, you have 5 more hours of daylight and hundreds of miles of streams and trails to play in. They love that we stop to haul strangers out of the ditch, that we look out for each other. The biggest challenge facing our businesses isn't our tax climate. We have one of the best. The biggest challenge isn't government. We're effective and have been working directly with businesses these last 4 years. The biggest challenge Montana businesses face is growth itself. Today, there are over 6,500 listed job openings across our state. As I talk to employers, they consistently tell me that their greatest barrier to expansion is recruiting enough talented and trained workers. And while we've made significant strides over these past 4 years, there's more that we can do. First, I'm asking you to invest in businesses that are playing a role in training the workers that we need. We've increased apprenticeships by almost 30% over these past 4 years, but a greater need remains. I'm proposing that we give businesses a $1,000 tax credit for each apprentice they hire, helping the employer get the skilled workforce they need and better paying the workers as they advance their skill set. And if the veteran hired, or if the apprentice hired is a veteran, I'm asking to provide a $2,000 tax credit. Second, let's incentivize businesses to invest in equipment to help them grow and expand. I'm asking you to increase the local tax abatement for new business equipment up to 75% for the first 5 years after purchasing that equipment. Doing so will make sure that businesses aren't taxed on new equipment before it adds to their bottom lines, and it won't be at the expense of existing local government services. And finally, let's pass the Paycheck Transparency Act. Workers, and especially female workers, should not be penalized for their prior wage history or for asking if they're getting paid the same as their coworkers. It's one more step in ensuring that all Montanans earn a fair day's wage for a fair day's work. Another value that's been universally shared over the history of our state is the recognition that we are the treasure state. And that means both our natural resources and the nature that is so important to all of us. As Governor Anderson implored, quote, environmental protection and economic development are not mutually exclusive, and, quote, we'll be the greatest fools in the history of Montana if we fail to provide for the preservation of our air, water, and land. Like our natural resources, our outdoor heritage is big business. Outdoor recreation accounts for 64,000 jobs and $6 billion in consumer spending each year. 3/4 of our resident deer hunters and 85% of resident elk hunters report that they hunt on publicly owned lands. And in 2015 alone, hunters and anglers spent an estimated $1.25 billion in Montana. The economic impact and the value that Montanans place on our outdoor economy cannot be taken for granted. We need to enhance these opportunities, not detract from them. I'm asking you to lift the limitations you placed on the Habitat Montana program. So sportsman dollars money paid by licensing fees, can continue to create and preserve places for our families to hunt, fish, and recreate. And let me be clear again. Do not send bills to my desk that suggest or start down the path of transferring our public lands out of public hands, because that won't happen, not on my watch. As we look to the years ahead, at the forefront of many people's minds is what Montana's energy future will look like. We should all take pride in knowing we are responsibly using our state's energy resources to provide good-paying jobs, strengthening our communities, and supporting local schools, all while safeguarding our quality of life, especially our clean air, water, and the tens of thousands of jobs that rely on them. As a governor and as a dad, I have a responsibility to address climate change. We know that climate change is happening because we experience it. And even if you have doubts, the financial markets are reacting, and our energy companies are planning around it. You often hear a false choice, that we can either address climate change or continue to produce power from fossil fuels, but not both. I reject that choice. We hold the largest recoverable coal reserves in the country. And Montana coal production has been higher under my administration than any previous one in the last 3 decades. Change is on the horizon, though, driven by historically low natural gas prices, regulatory concerns, and changing consumer demands. We also have some of the best wind and solar resources in our country. The first commercial-scale solar projects, as well as over 400 megawatts of additional wind power, will be under construction this year in Montana. These projects bring with them jobs for Montanans and a diversified tax base for a number of rural counties. As an exporter of energy, our energy path is partially dependent on choices and decisions that are made beyond our borders. That's why I'm directing members of my cabinet to travel to Western states, to talk with our neighbors about the diversity of resources we have to serve their needs. Let's add the value and create the jobs here, giving our neighbors more of the electricity that they want. And I'm asking you, this body, to take a number of steps. First, our cheapest and our greenest source of energy is conservation, the energy that we don't use. Making our homes and businesses more energy efficient puts people to work and lowers heating bills. Let's give our local governments the option to have property-assessed clean energy, also known as PACE. We'll boost energy conservation and give Montanans more power over their life. Second, if we want to move our energy future forward, we need to work together to improve our Major Facilities Siting Act. This suggestion came to me from community and business leaders through the Main Street Montana project. Our limited ability to move power out of state has hurt future prospects for energy development. Fixing these laws is an important step toward that future. And finally, while we won't solve the issues related to coal burning and carbon alone, we can take steps and we can make investments today that will help shape a better future. As many of you know, I've asked the U.S. Department of Energy to assess the Colstrip facilities for carbon capture opportunities. That work continues, and I'm committed to it. XPRIZE has staked $20 million in prizes for the teams that figure out how to capture carbon and turn it into commercially useful products. To complement that work, the Wyoming legislature has funded a center to test advanced technologies and innovation relating to coal and carbon capture. I'm asking that we get off the sidelines and join Wyoming's efforts by committing $3 million and making it a joint effort. To chart our energy future, we need vision and commitment that's grounded in reality. But we must not be afraid of the fact that tomorrow's reality will undoubtedly look different than today. I ask you to join me in shaping our energy future by design. Over the past century and a quarter, Montanans have also consistently recognized that government has a role in providing a hand up and a path forward for our friends and neighbors in need of our help. As Governor Judge said 40 years ago, it has been said that the stature of a government can be measured best by the compassion for its people. If that's the case, Montana has earned the right to stand tall. And indeed, this body, together, has provided many reasons for us to stand tall. 67,000 more Montanans, the majority of whom are working, now have regular and consistent access to health care. Not only saving lives, and that's not only saving lives, but also saving our rural hospitals in so many of your districts. We've upped our commitment to the full spectrum of mental health services. We finally invested in the full range of autism services. We also now require insurance to cover additional services for children with Down syndrome. And the rate of uninsured in Montana has plummeted from 20% in 2013 to only 7% today. The work that we've done to make Montanans healthier and safer isn't limited to legislative action alone. We created the Office of American Indian Health to help address the fact that our Native American neighbors have a lifespan, on average, 30 years less than non-natives. We established the Governor's Council on Healthcare Innovation, engaging industry leaders to come together in a sustained commitment to improve health outcomes and reduce costs in our healthcare system. We've expanded mental health counseling and assistance to all National Guard members and their families, because one soldier lost to suicide is one too many. That's why we've also expanded some of those services to anyone who's ever worn a uniform for our country. And thanks in part to the First Lady's dedication and commitment, 41,000 more young Montanans now get a healthy breakfast at school than was the case when we first took office. even as we look to tighten the budget, we can't forget that a healthy economy depends on the health of our citizens. I ask that you continue funding the full spectrum of mental health services that we provided last session, including those receiving services as a result of the HELP Act. Thousands more Montanans are now able to access the mental health care that they not only need, but they deserve. We must do all we can to protect our most vulnerable children, those at risk of abuse and neglect. Following the recommendations of the Protect Montana Kids Commission, I am requesting additional funding for our Child Protective Services workers, as well as needed legislative reforms. And while I'm so pleased that Montana leads the nation in so many economic indicators, I cannot tolerate that Montana also leads the nation in youth suicide. I am haunted by this statistic. And I imagine that you are haunted by it as well. I'm proposing $1 million to fund evidence-based pilot programs. We'll take what we learn from these efforts and bring it to scale, because we need to better keep our kids safe. And at the other end of the spectrum, we must do more to keep our seniors in their homes. This not only affords our legacy Montanans the dignity that they deserve, but it also saves us money. Therefore, I'm requesting you provide $1.5 million additional dollars to our area agencies on the aging and fully fund the respite care program. Our seniors deserve it. Fiscal responsibility, education, infrastructure, job creation, caring for others. These are immutable values that stand the test of time. And at the core of them all is the bedrock value of working together to get things done. Almost a century ago, in 1923, Governor Dixon implored the legislature, and I quote, "The people were never more ready for a constructive program. They were never more impatient of petty partisan politics that cause delay. They're looking to the membership of this present body for real results and will not be content with explanations of failure in accomplishment. The old-time appeals to party prejudice no longer bring forth real response from the mass of our citizenship." 70 years later, Governor Roscoe encouraged the same. He said, "Let us each vow tonight, quietly in our hearts, to shun the tired old games and the worn old labels. Let us stress, too, in our hearts and in our words, not the small differences that might divide us at times. Instead, let us treasure the immense similarities that unite us. Tonight, I'm asking you, all of you, to focus on the shared values that unite us so we may move our state forward. Because at the end of the day, Montanans want many of the same things: good-paying jobs, safe communities, great schools, clean air, clean water, and public lands to enjoy, and the promise that the next generation will have even greater opportunities than we all have today. The future is in our reach, but we must work together. And the time for games is over. We must engage in thoughtful, rational, and constructive dialogue with one another. The differences we have, while amplified at times, are small compared to what unites us. We have challenges and opportunities in the weeks and months ahead, and decisions to make that will impact our state long after the tenure of my office or the tenure of any of yours. Together, let's face them head on. Montana. For a kid raised just a few blocks from where we gather here tonight. This place, its people, its purpose, built for me a world where the improbable was achievable. Every kid growing up in Montana deserves that same opportunity and that same feeling of promise. And you can be assured that I'll do everything in my power, in our power, to make that a reality for this generation and the generations after. So I stand here to tell you, unequivocally, that now, more than ever, the state of our state is strong. And we as Montanans are strong. And we will become even stronger if we work together. Thank you. God bless you. God bless Montana. And God bless these United States of America. Thank you.
You've been listening to Governor Steve Bullock deliver his third State of the State address as he starts his second term. He spoke for about 45 minutes tonight, hitting on some familiar themes as you see the crowd there in the chamber, House chamber, responding to the governor. He hit on themes about being responsible with Montanans' money and investing in the future, of using the natural beauty and natural resources of the state as a resource, and of course supporting businesses as well, among other themes that he hit on. He went back in time and quoted from 10 former governors, all the way back to the territorial governor Thomas Marr back in 1866 to fill out his speech as he addressed everyone, and it really drew reaction straight down partisan lines for those who could see it. Of course, it was a reaction of the Democrats applauding and the Republicans unmoved, and the Republicans are about to give their response. We want to remind everyone that we will have the Republican response. Speaker of the House, Austin Knudsen, will be delivering that in just a few minutes. We will have that for you as part of our coverage here this evening. But for right now, we're going to bring in our analysts once again, and that is Republican Bob Brown and Democrat Frankie Wilmer. All right, your initial thoughts on what you heard tonight from Governor Steve Bullock.
Well, I agree with you, John. I think the partisan division was so definite, and it followed the center aisle. I remember some years ago I wrote an opinion piece for the state newspapers in which I suggested that the legislature in both chambers seat alphabetically, like the Constitutional Convention did. Because I think there's a lot of political peer pressure on members that's brought about by that center aisle. And even though there may be some Republicans that would prefer not to enthusiastically clap, and there might be some Democrats that would prefer not to either, that center aisle pretty much determines who applauds and who doesn't. And it just seems foolish to me. And when I was in the legislature, and I was there for many years, there was some of that, but it wasn't as pronounced. And I remember Senator Bruce Crippen from Billings and I were given a copy of the State of the State message before any other legislators saw it. And so we'd mark what we thought were the best applause lines. And when the governor, and they were both Republican governors, Stevens and Roscoe, said something that we thought was plausible, we'd clap, and rest of the legislators would clap. No one paid much attention to who began the applause. And generally everybody would. And Crippen and I, of course, got a big kick out of that because, you know, we pretty much directed when and where the applause occurred.
Yeah, well, these are different times now.
Different times now.
Sure,
Probably
yeah.
wouldn't work like it did now, though. There may still be some designated clappers. I don't know.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, no.
You know, but the governor did call for bipartisanship, especially on infrastructure. And like you, I noticed how clearly divided they were on the clapping and not clapping. But at the end, when he again said, let's work together, I did see them kind of let loose on both sides.
So the
I'm
spirit is
still
there.
in the hopeful stage of the early period.
I like that. I like that about both of you, that you're still optimistic at this stage of the proceedings. Yes, because we do have a long ways to go.
You have to be optimistic to serve, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. He did touch on many themes, and of course the number one thing is the budget that gets wrestled with in this. And before we get into the particulars of that, again, I just want to remind everyone the Republican response is coming up. We're going to have that as Speaker of the House Austin Knudsen will deliver that in response to the governor's agenda that he was just laying out there in front of the chamber. They're moving over to the Senate chamber right now, and when they're ready, we'll get you to that. But let's go ahead and dig into the specifics of some of it, and we'll start with infrastructure. That has always been an important point throughout this. It was problematic in the last session and actually didn't get done. And in this clip, this part of the speech, he actually put the onus on the lawmakers.
I have no doubt that every member of this body recognizes the importance of investing in infrastructure and publicly owned buildings. But Montanans need you to do more than recognize it. They need you to vote for it.
So again, the governor pushing them to vote on that. Of course, he was part of that process that broke down in the last session. So what do you see here going forward?
It's caused a lot of embarrassment to both political parties, and it should. You know, 3 sessions ago, when would it have been, 2013, the governor vetoed the infrastructure bill. It was only about $55 million. I say only because that's compared to the more recent proposals. And then last legislative session, I think the infrastructure proposal was somewhere around $127 million. And it failed by only 1 vote of getting the necessary 2/3 majority in the House of Representatives after it passed the Senate 47-3. And so that was kind of a political victory for an element in the House of Representatives that they imposed on the rest of the legislature because of the need for the 2/3 majority. Well, this year, the governor's got a big proposal because a lot of this stuff's built up. And so we're talking about somewhere around $292 million. And about $200 million of that would be bonding. And that's what requires the 2/3 majority. And about $92 million of that will be cash. Well, remember, the cash comes out of the ending fund balance. It comes out of the general fund. And so in the last stages of the legislative session, when all of this stuff's got to come together, it may be possible, since that $200 million figure and the $92 million figure are arbitrary, there could be another different combination of those. That may be where some money is found, a few $1 million or maybe quite a few $1 million, that could help the legislature balance the budget, complete its work on time, and wind up the legislative
The
session.
infrastructure piece is really important because the governor bragged about our economy quite a bit, and he gave a lot of substantive facts to back it up. But he said, and quoted both Republican and Democratic previous governors, that if we don't have the infrastructure, the business can't be profitable. You know, we're limiting ourselves. We will need to talk about this ending fund balance business because a lot of people do talk about it as if it were cash. It is not cash. It's expected cash, and that's a moving target. So the $300 million is to try to give some room for balancing out increased cost or reduced revenues that may cause an imbalance. And the governor, by the way, has been consistently committed in all terms and all presentations of his budget to a $300 million ending fund balance. We used to call it a rainy day fund. And don't forget that he took office in the aftermath of the worst effects of the recession. 2010, 2011, he elected in his first term. Governor Schweitzer had the initial response to that, and we cut everything. We just watched that ending fund balance disappear. So he has now a record of fiscal responsibility, and infrastructure benefits jobs and the economy in everybody's district. So I think that is a place they may not end up, where they start, but where they can find common ground and show that to Montanans that in our interest they can achieve something that will benefit us.
Yeah, well, we'll see if they can find common ground on another issue, which of course is education. That came up during the speech, and it's no secret that state revenues have been down and there have been talks of cuts, but in this particular part of the governor's speech, he was referring to increasing some funding towards education.
There are investments we can't afford not to make. I'm asking you to increase our state's investment in K-12 by $30 million. We can also increase our support for special education by $1.5 million. We can continue investments in preserving our native languages and our support for tribal colleges. We can invest $2 million to further build out the internet connectivity in our schools, and that investment will be leveraged up to 8 times over. And finally, it's time to follow the lead of 45 other states that have done it already and invest in publicly funded early childhood education.
Well, there was, we didn't see that there, but towards the end, that was another classic right down the aisle reaction to that particular proposal. So again, it's not the across-the-board cut approach to it. What do you think are the chances of this?
That's really important because this is where we start to see big differences. Across-the-board cuts are not on his agenda. Uneven cuts and even some investments. Educated people make more, they spend more, and they pay more taxes. And he won't be governor when we see the returns on this, but he's absolutely right about that research on early childhood education and its correlation with all the success measures of adult and their contribution to the economy, adult life. So, of course, you're talking to a teacher, so you're...
I'm
never going to say it's a bad investment.
Yeah,
it's a great investment.
Yes.
But that is where we're going to see some of the contentiousness. But, keep in mind that he is not talking about across the board. He's saying cut here, increase there. Overall, that fulfills his vision of where we ought to go.
Right. Okay. Well, Bob, you have to hang on to your thought because I'm being told that we're ready to go to the Senate chamber. We're going back to the Capitol as we're going to hear the Republican response to the governor's agenda. It will be the Speaker of the House. That's Austin Knudsen. He is representative from Culbertson. Let's listen in now for the Republican response to the governor's State of the State address.
Good evening to all of you here tonight and those tuning in at home. My name is Austin Knudsen, and I'm honored to be serving as the Speaker of the Montana House of Representatives. I'm also the representative for House District 34 and from Culbertson in the northeast corner of the state. Tonight, Governor Bullock outlined his priorities. But so far, he's provided little to no leadership on how to achieve these priorities. The governor paints a rosy picture of what his administration has done and will continue to do for Montana. But the fact is, we've heard all these all too familiar ideas before. In the bubble of Helena and the state capitol, it can be easy to overlook reality. Good-paying state jobs are plentiful. We sit in a beautiful building. And most of the time, the governor and his agencies have run of the place, except for a few months every couple years when the legislature comes to town. But I can tell you that communities across Montana do not look like Helena. If you talk to the oil field workers in my area of the state, the mine workers laid off this year in Columbus, the loggers in Eureka, the families in Colstrip worrying about their livelihoods, and the students looking for jobs after graduation, there is a very different view around Montana kitchen tables than the one outlined by our governor. Now, I'm not here tonight to paint a doom and gloom picture of our state. Montana is an amazing place to live, work, and do business. Christy and I consider ourselves blessed to have the opportunity to raise our children here in the state of Montana. And it's my children's future that motivated me to run for office and seek leadership positions. Montana is blessed with incredible natural wealth, and there are tremendous business opportunities here for good-paying jobs. And we Republicans know that it should not be state government that dictates whether or not businesses thrive in Montana. Far too often in this state, the culture of government obstruction impedes small business growth. If we move government out of the way and allow job creators to grow, create, and innovate, we can move this economy forward and get Montana back on solid financial ground. A solid financial plan begins with a balanced budget that doesn't spend more than it takes in. That's how it works for families, that's how it works for businesses, and that's how it has to work for our state. Republicans warned the governor over a year ago that going into this session, we were facing a budget crisis. In 2011, 2013, and 2015, this Republican-led legislature has left town with hundreds of millions of dollars in budget surpluses. But in the last 2 years, we watched state government under the Bullock administration grow and grow and grow while state revenues declined. Flags were raised, letters were sent to the governor, letters sent by legislators sitting in this room, warning of an upcoming budget crisis. But Governor Bullock was in the middle of a re-election cycle, ignored the financial reality facing him. During this past summer, Governor Bullock had the authority to begin reducing the state budget, saving the state millions, which would have helped reduce and offset this budget crisis we now face. But again, the governor was campaigning, and he did nothing. Montanans deserve to know what happened to their huge reserves. And going forward, we want more transparency on where Montana tax dollars are being spent. What we face now is not only a budget crisis, but a management crisis. The legislature is, by law, only in power for 90 days every 2 years. This means that the other 640 days, Governor Bullock and his agencies are at the wheel of the ship of state. And ladies and gentlemen of Montana and of this room, that ship is heading towards an iceberg. And the captain has been too busy listening to orchestra music and rearranging deck chairs to see the crash coming. We in this building want to look to our governor for long-term solutions and directions, the way a ship captain or a CEO of a corporation would provide. So we asked Governor Bullock, what is the long-term plan? And unfortunately, all we've seen so far are proposals for more spending, more government, and more bloat and Helenas, while Montanans are asked to foot the bill with higher taxes. This is unacceptable. Your Republican legislature knows that we have a limited time in Helena to lead and to provide real change and growth for our communities. And from day one of this legislative session, Republicans got to work. When Governor Bullock cut 27 troopers from the Montana Highway Patrol, the Republican caucus made it our priority to find funding to save these critical, life-saving positions. When Governor Bullock pulled the funding and canceled dozens of highway infrastructure jobs and projects and killed thousands of construction jobs, the Republican caucus led by immediately introducing a bill finding alternative funding for these projects. In response, the governor magically came up with $10 million on the day of our bill hearing. That's not leadership. His decisions would have taken away essential services and projects from our communities, and we simply won't stand for it. Republicans are also leading the way in education. By unanimous vote, during the first 3 weeks of the session, I am pleased to report the legislature, the House just passed K-12 funding for the next 2 years to ensure that our students are funded and that our local school boards can plan their budgets early for the next 2 years. That's leadership. We're leading the way on a real infrastructure plan, not throwing everything against the wall and seeing what sticks. We want to ensure that every Montanan has their basic, essential needs for clean water and working sewers, safe roads and bridges met. And the Republican caucus is also leading the way on Colstrip. The governor had very little to say this evening about Colstrip, and that's disappointing. This session, we've seen proposals from both sides of the aisle aimed at helping the town of Colstrip as this community faces an uncertain future. I'd like to recognize Lori Shaw, who is in the audience tonight. Lori and Colstrip United co-founder Ashley Dennehy have done amazing work as voices for their town, educating others about coal and the challenges Colstrip faces. I'd like to recognize them. Tonight, I'm thrilled to announce that I will be personally introducing and carrying a bill that will help keep Colstrips 1 and 2 open. We'll be releasing more information on this legislation in the upcoming days, but I can tell you that as an Eastern Montanan, I could not be prouder and more excited for this important legislation to help keep that critical asset to Montana going. As this legislature works towards solutions, we have to remember that state government must live within its means. Republicans will return our state savings account to a safe level, and we won't do it on the back of taxpayers and small business owners. We hope the governor will continue to uphold his pledge to work with us and to engage with us as we search for opportunities. And we pledge to continue to work with him to address Montana's challenges and help us live up to our full potential. Like many Montanans, I'm looking forward to the positive changes in natural resource development that our new president, Donald Trump, has announced. In his first week in office, he made some great strides today. He approved 2 major pipelines. That's going to be huge boons for the state of Montana, huge boons for our energy sector, and we applaud him for that. Yeah. And we are very excited about the prospect of working with Congressman Ryan Zinke in his new appointed role as the Secretary of the Interior. It'll be amazing to have someone with strong Montana values in the Trump administration overseeing the management of our public lands in Montana and pushing back against the Obama administration's recent despicable act of closing thousands of miles of access road to our public lands. This is yet another area where Governor Bullock has shown absolutely no leadership and has not pushed back at all on the federal government in these actions. Republicans are committed to ensuring Montanans, and indeed all Americans, can access our public lands while at the same time responsibly developing the natural blessings that those lands have given us. As this 65th Montana legislative session continues, I look forward to working with all of you, my colleagues, and the governor, as we work to reach results, because that's what the people of Montana sent us here to do. Results that will put Montanans first, not state government. Results that will make our government more efficient and more accountable. Results that will allow businesses to grow and create jobs. And results that will address the critical needs of communities across our state. And finally, results that will build a more secure future for our children and our grandchildren. I thank you all for your time. I thank you all for coming. God bless Montana. God bless the United States. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Republican response to the governor's State of the State address that was delivered by Speaker of the House Austin Knudsen, a Republican from Culbertson. He spoke for about 13 minutes there to outline some strong Republican themes that were warmly received by his Republican colleagues there in the Senate chamber. Of course, getting the state government out of the way, feeling that the state government should not dictate policy, and trying to move things forward, certainly on key energy issues, main point being Colstrip, as he pointed that out. Definitely wanted to give credit to the Republican-led legislatures of the last 3 sessions for their work in balancing the budget, and called out the governor on several occasions early on for campaigning instead of governing, and then questioning leadership a bit later on as he went through that speech. So Austin Knudsen delivering the Republican response this evening from Helena at the state capitol. Let's bring our analysts back in this evening as we have Republican Bob Brown and Democrat Frankie Wilmer. And Bob, first of all, they bring out the Speaker of the House to deliver the Republican response. What was your take on what his message was?
Knudsen's a bright young guy. He's articulate. I've known him for a few years, and I like him. I think most people who know him do like him. And I thought he wasn't particularly confrontational. He wasn't particularly partisan. I mean, he could certainly have been more so. He used the term despicable at one point in his talk, which I wouldn't have advised him to do. But basically, he did a good job. And I think his party, the Republican Party, is more unified this session than it's been in the past. You know, if there's anything Republicans can be united on, it's not spending money. And now they're in a situation where we're going to have to make some budget cuts. And Republicans are the party, I think, that is most conservative with budgets and money traditionally in all the states, including ours. So I think that'll help Knudsen keep his party unified behind him. And then, you know, too, there's an old saying that when the manger is empty, the horses bite each other. But I didn't find that the case in my years in the legislature, and I was there for 26 years. And it seemed to me that when we had surpluses, oftentimes there was a big fight about how to spend the money, what to do with the money. Well, when you're broke, then I think legislators in both parties kind of feel like they're in the same pickle together, and they actually cooperate a little better. So there might be the Republicans may be more united, but the Democrats might be as well. And that might help the legislature to bring the session across the finish line in compliance with some of the governor's requests. And this may not be as contentious a legislative session as some might have predicted to begin with. And I'm not predicting that either, you understand.
Right,
but I
right.
think there's a realistic possibility that that could happen.
Yeah, so there's the silver lining to not having a lot of money. That's what you're telling me.
Could be, yeah, could be.
Well, we'll see about that. Well, Frankie, how did that strike your ear as you were listening to it?
In part agree, in part disagree with Bob and with you. I think the themes, Republican themes, were well articulated, and he is a very bright guy. I like him. A former student of mine, so I don't brainwash them all apparently, and I've served with him. On the other hand, where I disagree is I do think it was sharply partisan, and I do think that it was unnecessarily so, and personal even, using the word despicable, as you said, that was ill-advised. Yeah. Attacking the governor's leadership instead of using that time to lay out your success story. I think was ill-advised. This governor has a record of fiscal responsibility and for cutting the budget when he needs to. I was a little perplexed. There was one sort of, I don't think it was, maybe it was an alternative fact, but he said that the government has grown over the interim when the legislature's out of town. Well, I'm not sure how that happens because the legislature controls the budget, so the government can't grow when the legislature's out of town. And the crisis thing, I don't think that we really need to overstate that. He called it a budget crisis. You say there's no money. I remind us that we're talking about projected ending fund balances, projected revenues, and so forth. It will continue to be a moving target. And we have a new president, uncertainty in the stock market and the economy. So, in fact, last week it went up again, but nobody's acting as if that means it's gone up. It's not cash in the bank. It's expected cash in the bank.
Right. Well, that budget is certainly a key topic that everyone's talking about in Helena. Let's get more detail on that. We're going to go back to the Capitol, into the House chamber, where Montana PBS's Beth Sabo is standing by with leadership in the legislature to talk about some of those key budget issues. Beth.
Thanks, John. I'm joined with House Majority Leader Ron Ely and House Minority Leader Jenny Eck. Now, Representative Ely, much of the governor's address, as well as the Republican response, was focused on the budget, of course, a big issue here in this legislative session. Now, Republicans have been adamant that they won't support an increase in taxes or any new taxes. So how does the GOP leadership plan to bridge the gap, in the budget shortfall without an increase in revenue?
So I think that's really important, and what you saw tonight was a good contrast of philosophies and where we need to go. We want to bring the budget. The Republicans are adamant that we're going to bring the budget back to the people of the state of Montana. We're going to bring the budget back to basics. We believe that once you get outside of Helena and you start to understand that there's more to the world in Montana than the city of Helena. We've got people at our streets, and we've got those in the mental health, Office of Public Assistance, and on and on and on. If you get outside of the city of Hamilton, or get out of the city of Helena and back to places like where I come from in Hamilton, you start to see the disparity in what the governor's talking about and what the Republicans are looking for. We want to get back to basics. We want to get the dollars back to our communities, and you can do that without an increase in taxes.
Representative Eck, we know that cuts are going to have to be made, and in some cases they're going to be deep cuts to some programs. The Democrats stand beside the proposal that the governor has made in terms of the cuts that he wants to see, but you've said in the past that the Republicans, what they're proposing is actually taking a hatchet to the budget as opposed to a scalpel.
That's right. I mean, we have to approach this budget in a strategic way. We know that this is a tough budget cycle. We know we have to make cuts, but how we do it matters, and we need to make sure we're not doing it on the backs of hardworking Montana families, that we're doing it in a way that's fair to everyone, and that we're protecting the most vulnerable who are affected by the budget.
Representative Ely, Republicans keep asking throughout the session, how did we get here? Speaker Knutson even compared the budget situation to a ship headed for an iceberg. So how does GOP leadership plan to reroute that ship?
So quite simply, the question is, how did we get here? The Republicans, when we as a legislative body left 10 months ago, the budget was on track. We were headed to an ending fund balance of $300 million, and that's all changed. And what's changed over time is what happened from the time that we left the legislative session. And what's happened is the fact that if you call it a crisis of management, call it a crisis of budget, but the dollars are gone. And what we see as Republicans is when the governor was driving this ship, is the way the speaker put it, there were options that he could have used to curtail the spending, and that's something that never happened. And so when the legislature's out of session, there's only one person steering the ship, and that has to come back to the administration and the fact that we didn't curtail the spending in time, which sets us into this situation that we're in right now.
We're 4 weeks into the session. Again, the focus with GOP leadership has been, how do we get here? Is it time to start focusing on where to go next?
You're going to see that. And then what you've already seen with the Republican leadership is the fact that we've come out with a bill already to increase infrastructure spending. So you've seen that the Republican leadership and the Republican caucus has introduced those bills. And we're on track to get the jobs back in the state of Montana, and you're starting to see that already. So we've taken the lead in trying to put the legislation together that we need to get the jobs back on the street, the infrastructure that's critical to keeping jobs in the state of Montana.
Representative Eck, do you think it's fair to place blame squarely on the governor's shoulders for the budget shortfall?
I don't think so. I mean, the legislature passed the budget that we passed last session, and I have to say, the governor insisted on a $300 million surplus, and thank goodness he did, because if he hadn't, we'd be in a very different position right now. The reality is we're in the black. We have some tough decisions ahead of us, but we can make them, and we can make them in a strategic way that won't be overly harmful. And it's going to be tough, but we got to look forward, and we need to take responsibility and keep moving forward and looking at possible solutions.
All right, Representative Eck, Representative Eli, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And of course, we know that the one thing that lawmakers are constitutionally required to do is pass a balanced budget. So, of course, it will no doubt dominate the rest of the session here in Helena. John?
Beth, thank you very much. Yes, there is much work to be done, as we got to hear from two lawmakers who will be in the trenches doing that work over the next several weeks of this 65th legislative session. We bring back in our analysts, Frankie Wilmer and Bob Brown. And Frankie, you heard that theme coming up once again, and I think what Ron Eli was trying to clarify there was that he thought there should have been some reining in during that interim period. Right?
So actually there was. The governor cut $121 million from the budget. And remember, this is not that we had cash and lost it or it was misspent. This was expected revenue that didn't arrive. Why didn't it arrive? Oil and gas revenues. Look at Wyoming. Look at the Bakken. Look at Colstrip. So the energy markets, I think, in large part are responsible for lower revenues than we expected, since the price of gas, natural gas, went down, and all the markets went there, and the demand for dirty or coal or fossil fuel energy and the Bakken declined.
And Bob, we heard from Jenny Eck talking about that there are going to be some tough cuts to be made here, and I guess we're back to that whole idea of will this maybe strike a bipartisan tone of having to get there?
I still think it possibly will, although Jenny's philosophy, I think, probably as the Democratic Party leader, is to protect the government programs that she believes and Democrats believe make our society better and fairer. That's their philosophy. And Republicans would prefer to have the government smaller and leaner and less intrusive and less expensive. And so we saw those two philosophies come out pretty clearly here. I want to say, though, that on the budget projections, that those things are notoriously inaccurate. I mean, you can't forecast, you can't crystal ball what the economy is going to do 2 years in the future. Yes. But they all try, and they all do their best. And in the last legislative session, the projection was that there'd be a $380 million surplus in the budget by June of this year, by the end of the biennial budgeting period. Well, it actually was $303 million less than that. So we're in the black, but barely, by about $77 million. And so how we work our way out of that, what combination of tax increases and budget cuts and that sort of thing, remains to be seen. And generally, there is compromise in government. At least there was for a lot of the time that I was there. That seems less likely now. It seems like the two parties are determined to stand by their principles. And I think sometimes they make a bigger thing out of principles. I think there's such a thing as opinions. You know, I might have a different philosophy than some other legislator, but that doesn't mean that those opinions are uncompromisable principles. And because the governor needs to have a budget to run the state, and because the legislature is the only game in town for him to get that, they've got to somehow come to an agreement at the end of the legislative session. So they probably will, but there'll probably be a lot of
constitutionally
shooting.
They have to.
Yeah, constitutionally they have to.
We can only hope that is the case. But that's been part of the discussion tonight, and of course another issue that is out there that really didn't get a lot of talk tonight was the idea of health insurance with the Trump administration moving forward with the repeal and replace of the Affordable Care Act. That is definitely going to play into the remainder of this session. Let's go back to Helena right now. Montana PBS's Anna Rao is standing by in the Senate chamber for more on that topic. Anna.
Well, John, more than 100,000 Montanans are currently insured either through a plan that they purchased on the Affordable Care Exchange or through the Medicaid expansion, that took place in 2015 that was also part of Obamacare. And now lawmakers have to grapple with what do they do for those people if it is and if and when it's repealed. Joining me now are Senator Fred Thomas, Senate Majority Leader Fred Thomas. Thanks for joining us. Hello. And Senate Minority Leader John Sesso. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
First question for you, Senator Thomas, is what are you hearing, or are you hearing anything from constituents on this potential repeal, replace? What are you hearing?
Definitely so. There's some people that are on particularly Medicaid. They're concerned about where their coverage will be going and coming from in the future. And so we're looking forward to what Congress and the President are going to do and repeal and replace. And we're working here to get ready and prepared to deal with the changes that come our way from the federal government.
And Senator Sesso, are you also hearing from constituents? What are you hearing from them?
Oh, my constituents are saying, what are we going to do about cost? We did a great job on improving access to health care, and now we got to do something about the cost of health care. They're saying, please don't repeal anything until you have good ideas to replace what it is you don't like about it. But there's a lot of good things about the Affordable Care Act that are working for Montanans. We got to make sure we preserve what's good about the law and make sure we do something about cost.
And I think a lot of people are wondering, what role do Montana lawmakers play if it is repealed, if something happens? What do you see the role of Montana lawmakers being? Senator Sesso, we'll go to you first.
Well, we got to roll with what we get. It reminds me of '09 when President Obama took over and we needed to infuse money into the economy in infrastructure. They sent down, I think it was March 9th when we finally got the federal bill, and we had to react to that. Same thing will happen this time if it happens while we're here. And what we'll do is react to whatever changes that they make. We're hoping that they, like us, want to keep what's good about the Affordable Care Act and concentrate and focus our energy on dealing with the cost issue. And I hope that they make some changes that then we can implement in Montana that addresses that issue.
And Senator Sesso was just saying something about what's good, and I know we talked earlier about maybe this pre-existing conditions thing. Is that something you guys are looking at, or this working group is looking at, and what are some of the things you will look at to maybe preserve?
Well, depending on what Congress does, the President signs, we'll react to that, and we'll be looking to hopefully that they do a total rewrite of the Affordable Care Act. While there are things we've given coverage to people through the Medicaid Expansion Act, it's kind of a freebie. We need to figure out how we take care of this, make sure that there's a very good insurance mechanism that takes care of Montanans, no matter what their income is. High, low, and wherever it is in there. We need a great mechanism, and that's a lot of the things that we're going to be working on, is preparing the state's laws to deal with the changes coming down with the federal government.
And you did mention the Medicaid expansion. That added about 60,000 people to insurance in the state, but there's a 10% match required from the state, around 70 million right now. We're not at 10%. I guess that's 2020 that we do 10%. So my question is, do we know what's going to happen with that? It sounds like at this point it's kind of unsure.
I think it's unsure. I expect that there will be substantial subsidy for through tax credits for the people that are in the Medicaid expansion group now, and or Medicaid for some and some not, but with tax credits. I expect there will be heavy subsidies on that end of the scale, and as you work up the scale of economy and income, those will be diminished, somewhat like they are now.
And kind of that's one of my questions to you, Senator Sesso. Do you think we have the money for that Medicaid expansion in the budget? I know things are tight right now, and it's $70 million already. Is there money in the budget for that in the future?
Well, I'm confident about Montana's future. I think we pass a great infrastructure bill. We get Montanans to work. Things good happen when Montanans are working. That'll generate tax dollars. Those will be the resources that we can take people off of the Affordable Care Act so they can get insurance on the exchange or wherever, and we'll have the resources to deal with it. We have got to grow the economy. We have to grow the economy through jobs and work, and then the issues of our health care will take care of itself.
Senator Sesso, thanks so much for joining us. Senator Thomas, thanks for joining us tonight, and good luck this session.
Our pleasure. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. And John, I can tell you that they are requiring lawmakers to take Saturdays off right now, so they set numerous days aside in case this comes down after the session has adjourned. They can come back into a special session and handle whatever changes need to be made to Montana law, and they have about 10 of those days set aside thus far. Time will tell if they're going to need those. John?
Anna Rao, live in Helena. Thank you very much. That is a very complicated issue for the legislature to tackle, certainly, and they're going to need those extra days as they try and block out the time in order to finish with that. Well, we're wrapping up here. We want to get some final thoughts from Frankie Wilmer and Bob Brown.
Sure. I think the governor, the speaker of the House, it's their job to outline the big differences and big visions. The people we just heard, the leadership one step down in the House and Senate, I heard the demeanor, a willingness to compromise, and they had the same interests of Montanans in mind. So those are the ones who get the job done when it comes to compromising between the two big different visions that we heard before.
Did you hear the same thing, Bob?
Yeah, and I think that's indicative of the fact that these are two of the most experienced leaders in the legislature. Sesso's been his party's floor leader, I think, for 3 or 4 sessions, both in the House and in the Senate, and the same with Fred Thomas. Fred was in before term limitations, which were his idea, incidentally, and then he's been the majority leader twice since then. But they go back a long ways, and there's a lot of mutual respect there, and I think that those two may be important bridge builders in this upcoming
and Jenny and
legislative
Ron
session.
as well.
Right. Yeah, I was looking that up. This is the 11th session for Fred Thomas. So yes, there's some people who know their way around the Capitol, certainly, to get that done. Well, we always appreciate a bit of an optimistic ending there as we look forward to the work that has to be done with the legislature. We want to remind everyone that for continuing legislative coverage here on Montana PBS, you can tune in each Friday at 7 o'clock for the Rundown with Beth Sabo to find out what's happening in the legislature and how that's affecting Montana citizens. That's the Rundown with Beth Sabo, Fridays at 7 on Montana PBS. Well, that wraps up our coverage tonight for the 2017 State of the State Address. From all of us here at Montana PBS, thanks for joining us, and good night.
The Montana PBS broadcast of the 2017 State of the State Address was made possible with support from the Greater Montana Foundation, encouraging communications on issues, trends, and values of importance to Montanans, and by viewers like you, who are friends of Montana PBS.
You are watching viewer-supported Montana